This is section 4.5, day 2, similar figures. Our objective today is to use proportions to find missing lengths in similar figures. Let's start with our vocabulary. An indirect measurement is used to measure distances that are difficult to measure directly. It is done by using proportions in similar figures. For example, if we have to measure the height of a tree, let's say we have to cut down this tree, we need to know how big it is for when it falls down. We need to measure the height of the tree. I don't have a tape measure that's going to go all the way up there. I need to use indirect measurements. So how did we determine if two figures were similar? This is what we did in the last lesson. The first thing, corresponding angles were the same measure. The second thing was that corresponding sides formed a proportion. These two things had to be true to say that a figure was similar. So to determine missing side lengths of similar figures, step 1, we set up a ratio of corresponding side lengths of the similar figures using only side lengths that are given. So realize they do have to be similar figures. So you want to set up a ratio with just numbers in it. Step 2 is set up a second ratio of corresponding side lengths using a variable for the missing length. Step 3, set these two ratios equal to each other, forming a proportion. And step 4 is solve the proportion for the variable. A couple important notes. Whichever figure you put on top of one ratio should go on top of the other ratio too. It doesn't matter which one you choose to put on top as long as you put the same one on top both times. Second important note, only try to solve for one missing side at a time. If you try to solve for two at a time, it's going to get too messy and it will not work out. And important note number 3, do not forget to label your answer. If it is labeled in the problem, you label your answer. So let's start with an example. You'll notice that all of the corresponding angles are the same measures. So we are going to find our missing sides. Let's call them A, B, and C. Now you'll notice that in both figures, this top side is given to us. That's where we're going to start. Our first ratio will be 3/6. Let's solve for side A first. So A lines up with 10. So since I put the 3 on the top, I put the A on the top of my second fraction with 10 on the bottom. Now I'm going to solve. I'm going to take my two cross products. So 6A equals 3 times 10 is 30. Divide by 6, and I get A equals 5. There's no label, so A just equals 5. Let's look at the next one. We're still going to use this 3 and 6. That's still my first ratio. Let's look at B. B lines up with 14. This is still my top figure, so B over 14. Now I set up my proportion, or now I cross multiply and divide. 6B equals 3 times 14, which is 42. Divide by 6, I get B equals 7. And now let's look at the last set. We're still going to use 3/6 equals 4.12 goes with C. Remember, this is the top figure, so 4.12 goes on top, and C goes on bottom. Cross multiply and divide. 3C equals 6 times 4.12, which is 24.72. Divide both sides by 3, and I get C equals 8.24 as my final answer. Here's another example. We're going to walk through this one together again. Start off by noting that they are similar figures. I'm telling you that for a fact. Our missing sides, let's call them A, B, and C, and D. We have got 4 this time. We know that the 150 lines up with the 90, so that'll be our first ratio. 150/90. equals, let's start with A. A lines up with 60. I've decided the 150 is my top figure. So I do A over 60. 90 times A is 90A equals 150 times 60, which is 9,000. Divide both sides by 90, and I get A equals 100. There's no labels again on this problem, so there's my answer. Let's look at B next. Start with my same ratio, 150 over 90 equals, B lines up with 39, so B over 39. Do my cross products, 90 times B equals 150 times 39, which is 5,850. Divide both sides by 90, and I get B equals 65. Now let's look at side C. I'm going to use my same initial ratio, 150 over 90 equals, C lines up with 100. 100's in my top figure, so 100 over C. Cross products are 150C equals 90 times 100, which is 9,000. Divide both sides by 150, and C equals 60. Last but not least is side D. Use our same first ratio, 150 over 90 equals 65 goes with D, so 65 over D. Cross products, 150D equals 90 times 65, which is 5,850. Divide by 150, and D equals 39. All right. Try this example. We're going to start by saying that this will be side A. This is B, C, and D here. Try to figure out the 4 lengths of these sides. All right, let's start by finding our first set. 2.83 goes with 1.41, so that'll be our first set. 2.83 over 1.41 equals, for A, realize I put this figure on top. A goes with 2, A over 2. Cross multiply, 1.41A equals 2.83 times 2, which is 5.66. Divide by 1.41, and A equals 4.01. There's no label on this problem, so there's my answer. Now let's look at side B. I'm going to start with the same ratio, 2.83 over 1.41 equals, B goes with 4.12, 4.12 goes on top. Cross multiply, 2.83B equals 1.41 times 4.12, which is 5.8092. Divide both sides by 2.83. You may have to round your answers, so B equals 2.05. Always round to 2 decimal places unless it specifically says otherwise. All right, let's look at side C. Start with our same initial ratio, 2.83 over 1.41. And C lines up with 4. So I put the 4 on the top, the C on the bottom. I cross multiply. I have 2.83C equals 1.41 times 4, which is 5.64. Divide by 2.83. And we get C equals about 1.99. And finally, let's look at side D. Same first ratio, 2.83 over 1.41. 2.24 goes with D. Cross multiply, 2.83 D equals 1.41 times 2.24, which is 3.1584. I can't put that 4. Divide both sides by 2.83. And you get D equals 1.12 once you've rounded. All right, one last problem for you to try. There are 4 missing sides on this problem. Let's call them A, B, C, and D. All right, our first ratio should set up the 5 and the 8. I'm going to choose this figure as my top. So 5 over 8 equals, let's use A over 9.22. Cross multiply, I get 8A equals 5 times 9.22, which is 46.1. Divide both sides by 8. And A equals 5.76. Remember, round to 2 decimal places if you need to. Now let's look at B. 5 over 8 equals B goes with 3, so B over 3. 8B equals 5 times 3, which is 15. Divide both sides by 8. And B equals 1.88. Now let's look at side C. For same initial fraction, 5 over 8 equals, C matches up with 4, but the 4 goes on top. So 5C equals 8 times 4, which is 32. Divide by 5, and C equals 6.4. And finally for D, start with 5/8 equals 2.83 over D. Cross multiply, 5D equals 8 times 2.83, which is 22.64. Divide by 5, and D equals 4.53. Here's your assignment.